Hello and welcome back to the Intel Brief. Today is Wednesday, the 22nd of July. I'm your host Daniel, and today we're going to talk about Ukrainian strikes have cut Russian refining capacity to a 21-year low. Russia has expelled Italian attachés in an escalating row over espionage. And the Iran war has cost $37.5 billion, says the Pentagon. So firstly, Ukrainian long-range strikes have driven Russian oil refining throughput down to roughly 3.8 million barrels a day, the lowest in 21 years, and down from 5.2 million before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. That is close to a fifth of Russia's refining capacity taken offline, with drones and naval assets hitting refineries, oil depots, and export infrastructure through June and July. Kiev has paired the refining campaign with strikes on Russia's shadow fleet, claiming at least 159 vessels hit across the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov during a recent 12-day drone operation. So what? Ukraine has had great success here, putting a lot more pressure on the Russian economy through these strikes, more than the sanctions have ever done. And degrading this refining and export capacity directly is highly likely doing more damage to the Kremlin's revenue than all sanctions have. Russia can repair these refineries, but it's not a very easy fix, especially as they've started to target specific parts of the refining process, like catalytic cracking equipment, which from what I understand is currently sanctioned and extremely hard for Russia to get. So, they're now not just hitting, every part of the refinery. They're really trying to target those hard to fix precision points within the process, which, is just going to make everything slower and harder and more expensive to fix. The thing to watch for me is the domestic fuel prices, the queues, the videos of queues along Russia, and also bans on export, even looking towards importing fuel. That will be a pretty significant sign, as sustained shortfalls will possibly force Moscow to choose between supplying its own army and earning hard currency, which is a pretty tough choice for it to have to make. And next, Russia has expelled 2 Italian military attachés from Moscow on July 20th, retaliating to Rome's expulsion earlier this month of Russian attachés Ivan Gorbachev, Jesus, crazy last name, and Mikhail Estakov. Italian authorities accused the 2 Russians of running spy networks against the Italian government from inside the Russian embassy in Rome. The case grew out of an investigation that led to the arrest of 2 former Italian intelligence officers who were accused of passing classified material to the expelled diplomats. So what? It's just good old-fashioned spy work here. Recruiting, human sources like this is very traditional for Russia and something they are extremely adept at. So, it's unsurprising that they've been caught doing it. They're almost certainly doing it in almost every country that they're involved in. These targets are also pretty classic. Serving and former intelligence officers. It does take years, but it is like the top target. These are the top people you want to be recruiting, as it gives you a huge amount of intelligence. And the attaché cover is a tough position to keep. They often hold diplomatic cover, but following the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, Moscow had a lot of their declared officers kicked out and a lot of their undeclared officers kicked out as well. So these are people in similar positions, such as military attachés. So it's likely that, these specific positions have really had to pick up the slack, and even possibly less experienced individuals who are less known to Western intelligence services have had to be pulled in to conduct this type of operation. So, yeah. And, the expulsions are the visible part. Rome's damage assessment is likely still open, and it's possible there's going to be further arrests. It's unlikely that there was just 2 people within this network. It's quite possible there was more. So there's possibly more to come here. And lastly, the US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told the Senate Appropriations Committee on July 21st that the war with Iran had cost $37.5 billion so far, an increase of nearly $8 billion since the last public estimate, and a figure that has already folded an anticipated spending through to 30th of September. Exeth and the Joint Chiefs Chairman General John Cain used the hearing to request $67.1 billion in supplemental funding covering both munitions, drones, and Army and National Guard deployments, probably to the Middle East and also to the southern border and to the Washington region. Roughly 430 American troops have been wounded and at least 18 killed, with 4 in the last 4 days being confirmed dead. So what? So while that number is already pretty shocking, it's already old news. That's what they have spent. As we all aware at this point, they're going back into the war. So it's almost certain they're now spending more money. And it's like trying to bundle all this money together. So they clearly need more, which is difficult to get, as this figure is already significant and it's likely to climb drastically as the conflict goes on, as this type of conflict is extremely expensive. And, the request for supplemental money is not just about Iran. They've folded in border protection and the Washington deployments into the funding request, possibly designed to make it more difficult for Congress to pull it apart and block it. They've made it pretty clear they don't want to fund the war in Iran, but if you make it about other things as well, it's more difficult to push back on, though I think it's likely they will. And casualties are accelerating here. 4 deaths in 4 days against the 18 since February. It likely signals a shift in the conflict trending upwards, and that we're not really going towards peace. But we've talked about that a lot. It's pretty clear at this point that the deal is extremely hard to reach and unlikely at this stage. So yeah. Anyway, that's been the Intel Brief. I've been your host, Daniel, and I'll see you again tomorrow. See you!